Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this little introductory webinar. I'm not sure if it's morning when you're watching this, but welcome and thank you for joining. And I'm Marissa Pazant, and I'm the Assistant Administrator of the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment at the NDE and Director of the Content Area Standards. And I'll have Kelly, who's also joining me from ESU2. I'll have her introduce herself. Welcome, Kelly.
I'm Kelly Georges. I work at ESU2 in professional development, and I'm also the co-leader of the math cadre for the ESUs.
Yes, thank you very much. All right, well, I'm going to start rolling here. So we have a few goals for this little session. Really, this is just to give our math educators and our, school and district leaders just kind of a general overview of our standards revision. So at the time of this recording, we're about 2 weeks out from the Nebraska State Board of Education approving our revised math standards. And so this session is just going to talk a little bit about why we revise standards. So understanding the why behind standards revision, whatever the content area. So whether it's math or whether it's social studies or science, we'll talk a little bit about why we revisit those standards at the end of a 7-year cycle. We're also going to orient everyone to some of the significant revisions that were made, and then familiarize everybody with the supporting resources. We've got several pieces that we've been working on. So some are still in development, but toward the end of this presentation, I'll click over into the NDE Math website and we'll kind of look at what's there. And then just helping everybody understand where we're at. So once standards are revised, once they're approved by the board, kind of a what's next. What are the expectations for teachers, for school and district leaders? We all kind of play a role in how those standards are ultimately implemented in classroom instruction. So those are our goals. And I'll just pause here and say it's highly recommended that anybody who's going to engage with our rollout resources, which I'll talk about more at the end of this session, that you first kind of watch this introduction, just to kind of give you the context before you move forward into some of the other resources. So that's what today's about. I'll start here just with some language regarding our Nebraska revised statute. I won't read all the numbers there, but in the state of Nebraska, our state board is required to adopt measurable academic content standards for those at least those grade levels that are required for statewide assessment. And so in the state of Nebraska, we do provide content area standards in all of the areas, including career and technical education, certainly the assessed areas, reading, writing, mathematics, science, social studies. And so every 7 years, or every 5 years, and then at the end of the 7-year cycle, the product is the revised standards for the content area. But we review all of those subject area standards and make necessary adjustments or revisions. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, we're at that point where the board has approved them. We've gone through that process. Just real quickly on this resource here, this is up on our NDE Content Area Standards webpage. This is basically a timeline of the revision cycles for all of the content areas. So you'll see clustered there at the top, we have English language arts, math, and science. Those are, statutorily required areas. And if I could draw your attention to math there, that middle one that's green, we started the process of revision in the spring of 21. And you'll see that little target symbol. I know it's kind of hard to read, but we stayed right on track for this revision with the target approval date of fall of 2022. So that's where we're at. The standards were approved on September 2nd. You will also notice, I'll call your attention to the fact that ELA, math, and science, and in fact, all of these content areas, we're at the end of the span of years that's represented here. So that's why you see an update in progress. We are working on redoing this calendar, this timeline, so that we go all the way out into the next couple of cycles. So keep an eye out for that. We'll share that widely once this is updated. Okay, so the process, as I mentioned, we started in the spring of 2021, and we really have a pretty well laid out process in terms of what happens first in the revision, who's involved, what are everybody's roles. It starts really with a public input survey. So we take that set of 2015 standards, we share it out with the field with kind of a standard survey of, what needs to be added, what needs to be removed, are things not working, what needs to be updated, refreshed, all those good things. So there's several people who play a role in that. All right, so you'll see this rapid model. This is just a kind of a framework that a lot of states use in the arena of standards revision. So we do utilize subject matter experts. These could be faculty at our post-secondary institutions. They kind of provide resources, especially as it concerns, some of the developmental aspects behind standards revision. So they might weigh in on what's developmentally appropriate in terms of the progression of math skills. We also have post-secondary advisors. Those are also, could be from our institutes of higher education. The subject matter experts, I'll correct myself, they're a little bit broader. So that could be a national expert, a researcher. Post-secondary advisors are mostly from our local state college and university systems. We did use team facilitators. They kind of coordinated and oversaw the revision team members, or what we sometimes refer to as our writing team members. So those are the folks, mostly math educators, classroom teachers, math coaches, things of that nature. And they really take the input from all of these different people and the data from our public input surveys, and they actualize it in the language of the standards. So there's a lot of people involved. Certainly individuals in the Nebraska Department of Education. There's a lot of cross-agency collaboration where it concerns standards. So just lots of different people involved. And then throughout this process, we are taking the information to the state board, really updating them on every single part of the process, where we're at, where we're going, with ultimate approval after we present the drafts. So that's kind of how we get here. As we're looking at the standards and indicators, we're really putting them through these filters for quality. So for every standard or indicator, we ask, is it measurable? Can we measure it either, is this measurable through NSCAS, like an end of year summative type of assessment? Or should it be measured with, say, formative assessments or interim assessments in the classroom? We ask whether it's appropriately challenging for the grade level. We always want to be mindful of rigor and really challenging our students to think mathematically. We look at how it's connected to either skills and dispositions that the student already has, or how it's connected to other content areas. We definitely look at the wording. We want to make sure that these standards and indicators are clear enough so that the classroom teacher understands what's expected in terms of instruction. We look at the scaffolding across K-12. So whether or not an individual standard kind of builds, in terms of scaffolding, like some of those skills we want students to have mastered or have proficiency in before they move to the next grade level and so on. And then we look at the specificity. Is it, that kind of goes back to measurability as well. Is it specific enough that we can measure it in some way? And again, all of these, we have a document on our content area standards webpage, and it really lays out and gives full descriptions of all of these quality criteria that we use. A little bit about the coding. This follows what you'll see in other content area standards. This is our traditional coding system. So here's just a little example. We have the content area comes first. So MA for math or LA for English language arts and so on. That's the content area. And then the next the next code there is for, in this case, kindergarten with the K. And then the content strand is next. So N stands for number. And then the 1 is the standard itself. And then if the standard has an accompanying indicator, you'll see that with the lowercase letter. All of these, there's more information about all of this in the front matter of the standards. So we've really kind of beefed up the introductory matter and the introductory information that we provide in the standards document itself. So you'll see this example in those front pages with, you know, a little more detailed information if you want to read further about that. And that's on page 5. The standards address just the overall structure. All right, so I'm going to turn things over to Kelly, and she's going to speak much more knowledgeably than I can about some of the actual content of the revised standards. And the first one being the content strands. And she'll also just talk a little bit about what may be different between 2015 and 2022. I'll turn it over to you, Kelly.
All right. So we still have 4 content strands. So this is the what that is being taught. Number is the ideas around number sense. This is where operations are, looking at relationships between numbers, between operations. So looking at that relationship between addition and subtraction, or multiplication and division. This would also be where fractions lies. And then geometry focuses on shapes, both 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional. We want students to be recognizing shapes, but also analyzing them, looking at their properties and solving problems using properties. And then they will be doing that both on and off of a coordinate plane. Within algebra, kids are solving problems in context, using different properties of algebra to solve. And then they're also looking at lots of different types of equations over K-12. So they're looking at linear equations, they're looking at inequalities, things like that, just different types of equations within algebra. And then the data strand is much beefier than it had been previously. So this would include all probability, all graphing, so different types of graphs, and then also collecting data, analyzing it, and then displaying it and being able to compare different types of displays and when you would use each one.
And Kelly, before I switch slides, here's something that I meant to mention earlier, and I might not have, but using this data strand as an example, this is one of the reasons why we revised standards. We really did strengthen that whole data strand across K-12. Great example of something that has changed over the last several years. The expectations for students to be literate with reading all kinds of different data has really come a long way, just even in the last few years. And so because our standards are college and career ready, we want students to, we know that students are going to have expectations, whether in their career field or whether in, you know, college courses, the expectation is for them to be able to read data proficiently in all the different types that it comes with. So, all right, now Kelly's going to talk a little bit about these processes.
So the math processes are different from the contents standards, really, this is how kids should learn math. So what should be happening in a math classroom every single day? And these processes are what make kids great problem solvers. So the first one is problem solving. And this is really that students are the ones solving problems. They are using multiple strategies. They're persevering when they get stuck or when one strategy doesn't work. Reasoning is really the idea of making sense of both quantities. What does a number mean, but also abstract ideas within math. They are comparing strategies. They're really talking a lot about efficiency. So yes, there's lots of ways to solve these problems, but which ones are most efficient in certain situations? Representation is how kids are organizing, communicating, and recording their ideas. How are they showing that they know both on paper and then also just talking about it? Connections are super important because there's different types of connections. One of them to focus on is looking at connections between mathematical topics. So again, between addition and subtraction, between multiplication and division, things like that. But then also the connections to other disciplines. So how are math and science connected? How is math and art connected? And how can we show those things? And then lastly, communication is super important. We want kids to be able to explain and justify their own reasoning, both in writing and in speaking with teacher, with peers, in small groups, large groups, all of those situations. So one thing that is new about the standards, the most recent standards, is the idea of grade level content focus. So at the beginning of each grade level, you're going to see something like what's on the screen now, and it's going to give a couple of bullets about like what is the most important things, or what are the most important topics that each grade level should focus on. And so where should you be spending a bulk of your time teaching? Yes, all of the standards are important. Yes, we want kids to learn all of the standards, but these are the absolutely critical areas for each grade level.
All right, thank you so much, Kelly. And again, we're going to have a little contact information at the end, and so if there are questions that are kind of generated as you're watching this information, please feel free to reach out. Again, this is just an introductory kind of cursory overview, and with that, I'll kind of transition into everybody's big burning question. Once the revised standards are approved, what are some of the significant revisions between the two sets? And so I'm going to, actually Kelly is going to kind of run through some of these, just a real high level overview. And again, reach out if you have further questions.
Yeah, so these couple of bullets are just the biggest main differences between the standards. The first one is just less standards. So we tried to really pare down what each grade level should be focusing on. There was definitely a highlighting of ratios and proportions within 6th to 8th grade. So in that middle school grade band, there is a lot more there to help that bridge between kids doing operations and really doing lots of application problems and lots of algebra when they get to high school. There were a couple of changes to high school algebra. One is to just align it more with the ACT. So make sure that the topics that are in that 9-11 grade band are really what is going to be seen on the ACT for kids, but also really allowing schools to then rethink what's Algebra 2. And so what is it that we are getting kids college and career ready for, so that Algebra 2 can be revamped in a way that makes sense for all kids, that the topics are relevant to their life, no matter if they're going to a 4-year institution, a 2-year institution, or working in a job, that content is really what they need. Additionally, like we mentioned, we focus on strengthening data. We know that kids and adults alike are constant consumers of data, and we just really want to focus on making sure that kids understand how to analyze data in a way that makes sense and how to recognize when it doesn't make sense. And then those mathematical processes that I just talked about, just really strengthening that how kids are learning so that they are really the focus of the learning, and they're doing the problem solving and they're doing the communicating about the mathematics.
And I'll just add to this, just from the revision process perspective. All of these revisions that ultimately get made, these are all based in the public input that we get. So when we send out that survey that kind of kicks off the whole process, the respondent, these are coming from feedback that the respondents to the survey are giving. And not only just the survey, but we hold a lot of, there's a lot of opportunity at the beginning of the process to just collaborate and talk, and all of these bullet points up here, they're first like considerations. We call them considerations. We're considering this as a revision. And then as we go through the process and we develop drafts, and we continue those important conversations with our subject matter experts, with our post-secondary advisory group, then they become recommendations. Ultimately, they become revisions that are approved by the state board. So just important to note that there's a lot of expertise that's involved in getting to this kind of final product. Well, we are kind of nearing the end of our time together. And as promised from our session goals at the beginning of this presentation, we're going to talk about a little bit about the stages of implementation. I've mentioned a couple times we do have a Nebraska Department of Education Content Area Standards webpage. And this is one of the resources that you'll see. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but the Nebraska Content Area Standards Implementation Framework. And what this describes is really what these stages of implementation. So once standards are approved, and that's usually in the fall, that's typically when the state board, September, October, would approve a set of standards. This academic year, we're in the stage of exploration, and it's pretty much what it sounds like. Watching this webinar is part of that exploration process, just getting yourself familiar with what's different, what's new, the implications for instruction. And then if you follow that arrow down to the right, then the following academic year, so that'd be 23-24, we're into initial implementation, where a lot of the work has to do with just really looking at our curriculum, our instructional materials, and how are we going to actualize those standards so that students are meeting them. And then it kind of moves, the following academic years just really moves into scale up, and then deep implementation and sustainability. I always kind of chuckle though, once you get into that last phase, it's just about time for a new revision cycle to start. And that's where we get the question, I was just getting comfortable with the set of standards and now they're changed, just kind of the nature of the beast. But just recognizing that these revisions really at the heart of them are, care for our students and making sure that they are college and career ready, and that our standards reflect what's necessary in the field. And so if you want more information about this, I would just encourage you to explore this entire document. We have also or are working on adapting this to mathematics specifically, and just really laying out what are some of the activities that should take place in the year of exploration, for example. Okay, so now I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm hopefully this will click over smoothly. I'm going to move us over to the NDE Math webpage and just kind of do a quick overview of the sorts of resources we have available right now. Kelly, did my screen switch? Yay. Sometimes it doesn't always. Okay. So I'm on the main page here for NDE mathematics. And you'll see this language that I shared previously in the slide deck. Here's where you'll find the standards document itself. That's a PDF. You can just click on there. And then these are some of the resources. The ones that are linked here are the ones that are finished. They're available already. We have some key features and talking points. This document is going to go a little bit deeper into those revisions that we talked about. Very, very important resource here. This is our key instructional shifts for mathematics. This is a very important piece of information to get familiarized with as you're exploring the revised standards. Key instructional shifts are the changes that we need to make in our instruction so that we're ensuring students are meeting the standards that we've laid out. And so there are 3 instructional shifts for mathematics. They are focus, coherence, and rigor. You'll see this document is broken down into, so it describes what that shift is, and then it lays out some expectations for classroom teachers, for school leaders, and for students. So I would recommend that, as you're engaging in activities with the standards, that this is printed off. This is part of your package of resources right along there with your standards. We do have a crosswalk. I'm not going to click on this, but if you want to see a side-by-side of the 2015 standards and indicators with 2022, that is available. And then we've got some resources that are in progress. So we haven't touched a whole lot on instructional materials in this webinar. That's addressed a lot more in our rollout series, which I'm going to get to in a second. But if you're familiar with the work of Ed Reports, that's an organization that evaluates instructional materials for quality. And so they've got their gateway system based on materials alignment to our standards, not our standards, but Common Core state standards for mathematics. We'll have a document that kind of does a side-by-side of those quality indicators and how our revised math standards address those or allow the fulfillment of quality in the materials. And then the crosswalk above does not currently contain kindergarten. That was an omission that, just a miscommunication. So that's in development. I'm expecting that any day now. We'll also have an updated math standards glossary to accompany the standards. It'll have all the terms that you'll see in there with just the common language. It's important to have common language around some of these terms, just so we're all kind of talking about the same thing. We're also going to provide the standards in like a horizontal Excel document. And then also in development, we're going to have an importable file so that school districts can take all the standards and upload them into, say, an Infinite Campus or something of that nature. So keep an eye out on this webpage. It's a good one to have bookmarked because this will change week by week as we develop these resources. And then the grand finale here, we have, starting with ELA last year when we had revised ELA standards, we really felt like something that had been lacking with standards revision was just a consistency in how those are rolled out. We wanted all educators in the state to really get the same information and really have some common thinking and approaches toward the revised standards. And so we've continued that tradition into the math standards revision. We'll do it again for science. We've developed these 4 sessions for educators, for our ESU staff developers like Kelly, For our math teachers, you can roll through these independently if you need to. But session 1 kind of talks about this vision that we should have for excellent math instruction. What does that look like? Why is it important to realize the vision? You'll see that 2 of the sessions are devoted to those instructional shifts that I showed here. So those 2 sessions just really get deep into what those instructional shifts are. And then session 4, the title here is Preparing Teachers to Implement the Standards. So for each of these modules, you have just a little handful of resources. There's a PowerPoint presentation. There's a reflection and planning guide. This one has a little survey, I think, just inviting folks, participants to give a little feedback on these. So if you click through these, you'll have the PowerPoints, just all the materials that you're going to need to get through those rollout modules. And Kelly, you were really involved in the development and creation of these. Is there anything you might add?
Yeah, I think that these are also meant for either professional developers or curriculum people within districts to really take and make your own. If you want to use them as is, that's great. If you want to, say do sessions 1 and 2 together and things like that. So these are meant to be yours to adapt to your needs based on your school, your teachers, your students.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's such an important point to make. We worked really hard to design these so that they were adaptable, because honestly, I mean, the needs in each local context are so different. And so feel free to adapt these. They're designed that way. So, okay. Kelly, did my screen switch back?
Yes.
Okay. Well, this is just our departing slide. Thank you, everybody. Again, if you're engaging with those rollout resources, please make sure to, view this resource first. And of course, any questions, there's my email address. Please feel free to reach out. If you're a teacher watching this, I would encourage you to, collaborate with your ESU, with your other math teachers. There's a lot that should be happening with these revised standards this year and next, and the year after. So thank you again. Kelly, did you want to add anything there?
No, I would just emphasize also, if you need anything, if you look at those rollout resources and need help, reach out to your ESU. There's some amazing content knowledge and teaching knowledge, and we are more than happy to help with anything that you need with this rollout.
Thank you, everybody.